Welcome to this podcast on digital responsibility. There's a vibrant community across the world at the moment driving forward corporate digital responsibility, which includes a range of aspects from digital ethics, digital for the environment, sustainability, digital well-being, inclusion, accessibility, and more. My name is Rob Price, one of the founders of Corporate Digital Responsibility back in 2017. If you'd like to know more, have a look at the website corporatedigitalresponsibility.net. Welcome to the new series of the New Digital Responsibility podcast, and we're going to do a mini-series talking about the launch of the new International CDR Manifesto. Today I'm delighted to be joined with my co-collaborator on that initiative, Tim Frick out in Chicago. Tim, welcome.
Hello, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So, Tim, we must be 2 years kind of or so that we've been talking about some of the issues around CDR and whether that's been back in the work you've been doing previously around Sustainable Web Manifesto or indeed the articles that you've written and your work in BCorp. What's the driver for you? Why were you kind of keen to be involved in this initiative?
I think, and I know you want to talk about North America, and I think that's a really core part of this. You know, we have Silicon Valley in the U.S. I love it or hate it, and you know, I have, as an early proponent of digital as a way to help organizations, you know, grow and evolve and you know, kind of transform. You know, I started my agency in 1998 and was really trying to help, you know, kind of the mission-driven organizations, the nonprofits, the civic agencies and stuff. And having seen kind of big tech arise over the course of the last 20 years, I've become increasingly concerned at how digital is being used to kind of undermine information and society in general, and just kind of seeing the problems that started to bubble up, especially in the last 10 years. And so my own agency is a B Corp, as you mentioned, and we've been focused on sustainable digital design for almost 10 years now. And so to me, corporate digital responsibility really just felt like the next natural evolution of what sustainable digital should be. You know, and I also really I really liked that it embodied the social side of things as well. You know, we've gone through and evolved this definition of CDR to include, you know, economic, social, and governance and environmental and stuff. And so I've been really, you know, kind of excited to see that, because it just felt like a natural extension of the work that I and my company have been doing for quite some time.
And I know that one of the things that you were really interested in as well was Michael's definition. So Michael Wade kind of produced the definition in 2020 that was originally published in the MIT Sloan Review, and I think you wrote a series of 4 articles that were exploring in some detail each of the quadrants that Michael talked about before. How did you find that? I mean, and I asked that again, coming back to CDR is very much kind of has been a European-centered kind of activity. So how did you first come across CDR?
You know, I don't actually know the specific moment. I'd love to say that it was like a light bulb went off over my head and I was like, yes, this. Although running across Michael's article in the MIT Sloan Review was very close to that. You know, we've been working on digital sustainability, as I mentioned earlier, for a while. And had been struggling with, you know, we're part of the B Corp movement, which is, you know, how to run a socially conscious business that's environmentally friendly. We're a digital agency, and we're, you know, always trying to figure out how those two things mesh together. And I was seeing things like data privacy and you know, some of these terrifying stories about racist AI algorithms and murderous autonomous vehicles and all these things, and starting to get a lot of concern over this, but wasn't able to put a framework around it, or, you know what I mean, like to actually define it in a way that was clear. It just felt like a lot of disparate topics randomly thrown around, and many of them were in and covered in like Be the Change, which is a storytelling platform for the B Corp community. They were covered in the circles in which I traveled. And so I eventually found my way to Michael Wade's article and found it fascinating. And that was really the moment where I was like, yes, this definitely this. And so then I started reading, you know, what was out there at the time in the academic literature on the more academic side. And there really wasn't a lot. And one of the papers I read while I was researching my own posts about CDR was that basically it had said something to the tune of this was last year, prior to that, since the 90s, I think it was, only about 50 research papers have been written about the topic of corporate digital responsibility proper. And at the time, I already knew that you were working on this kind of work, and it really kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that there were people in pockets, popcorn pockets all around the world that are touching on this, maybe not giving it the specific name of corporate digital responsibility, but thinking about how digital and CSR kind of merged or fit together. And I think related to that, just a quick thing is, I also read about the 18th SDG that a lot of folks over in Europe were kind of promoting the idea of.
Absolutely. I kind of very much remember the 2017-2018 debates where we were advocating the need for the 18th SDG. But you're right in the sense that, over the last 2 years especially, we've found so many people around the world in different countries who've been either kind of very focused on CDR, Germany, Switzerland, kind of large numbers of people, groups there, or indeed things that are very like CDR. We talked earlier on the podcast with Chris McLean from Avanade, and the digital ethics definition that they've been running with is very similar in content to the work that we've done. And of course, other organisations that we've spoke to and we referred to in the work that we've been doing recently, Ethos Foundation in Switzerland, who described their 7 principles last year. Now, of course, it's interesting in that as over the last few months, kind of the number of us, and as you said, a number of people from an academic, published authors, corporate practitioners, we each have a different perspective, and we've come together to try and take the best of those definitions, right, and put it in a framework that makes sense for any organization, public or private sector, to help consider all of the aspects that have an impact positively on society and the planet. And I think today when we talk about that, there's so much more understanding and interest
for sure
in that fact, because we all want to kind of find a route to a better place to be, a more sustainable society on a planet that seems right to be in a better place. So that's great. Coincidentally, of course, we've ended up with 7 focus areas, 7 principles that we've defined, right, entirely by chance, in the sense of different from Ethos, but very much kind of taking some of the great points that Ethos kind of described in their paper. So the first of those was purpose and trust, and very much thinking about common to all of the activities that those businesses have got. How do we provide this governance and obsession on doing the right thing, but doing the right thing threaded through the organization, not just intent or marketing, but such that the employees and the customers, citizens have that common focus. Yep. Now, that must align quite well to some of the BCorp kind of focus as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's completely aligned with that. My company, which is a digital agency, has pretty much adopted the very similar language to, what B Lab uses in its theory of change, and what many other B Corps use in terms of that whole idea of a triple bottom line, and that kind of thing. And it's very much aligned. I think to your point about the thing that is interesting to me, especially as a digital agency owner. I'm a 55-year-old man, which is an old dog in digital agency terms. It's a young person's game. And I know that when I talk to companies about CDR, the younger folks at those companies are the ones that are driving a lot of this, and they're really excited and they're really, really into it. And that is really rewarding to me as I give kind of conversations and workshops and training around these concepts. And that's really great to see. And it's also the same within the B Corp community. The B Corps that are really thriving and doing well are the ones that are embracing, these practices at their core. And that's definitely resonating with those who are early on in their career coming into the workforce versus those of us who have been around for a while. And Not to say that I mean, I've kind of always been focused on having a purpose-driven mission in my company, no matter what, and in my work. It's not like, boomers and Gen X and weren't thinking about this stuff. We absolutely were. I think that we're at a place where we finally reached a critical mass where this can, hopefully, knock on wood, become the norm as opposed to the exception. And I think when I came up in business, it was very much the exception. You worked at a large company and you had to turn your head a lot, and you kind of had to ignore a lot of the stuff that the company was doing. And now it's at a place where there's enough of a critical mass of people interested of all generations that, we can actually make some positive, proactive change happen, which is very exciting to me.
And one of the key aspects of this principle that we've talked about is the need to have open and transparent governance in place. So yes, we've talked about it in terms of things like digital responsibility code that's displayed on website in terms of the clarity and the commitments they're making, but also kind of the governance in terms of how do the organizations make some of those grey area decisions that are impacted by the use of data or the use of AI or the use of kind of broader technologies within the business. So the concept of the Digital Ethics Advisory Board or I mean, CDR councils we've talked about before, guardian councils, sometimes internal, sometimes external. Now I'm hearing that kind of that's something that's talked about quite a lot by analysts as an emergent need. Certainly kind of 2022, 2023, the expectation is that will be far more instances out there of organizations needing to get some sort of guidance in that space. But of course, it's quite different from ethical guidance. Well, aspects are similar, but the degree of kind of technological know-how needed, and especially the impact, broader impact, that's different from people thinking around what organizations have previously needed to do around modern slavery or other aspects of kind of ethical guidance within organizations. So we've talked about that at some length, but how do you see that? I mean, we mentioned the North America before, so let's kind of pick this one. What have you seen happen within the US, for example, around organizations adopting either external or internal bodies around digital ethics guidance?
Sure. I think on the pure ethics, digital, maybe being inclusive of that or not yet. I think the rise of the B Corp movement, the explosion of the B Corp movement globally, not only just in the U.S. and Canada, where much of the original B Corp kind of energy was happening in the late 2000s and early 2010s. That the explosion of that since COVID happening and seeing B Corps thrive has been really exciting, and also within that community seeing a lot of questions popping up, of understanding like, well, I know that I need to I need to be GDPR compliant. I needed to, there's an increasing number of things that fall under the kind of digital umbrella that people are starting to incorporate into these conversations. I don't think we know that there's a great framework in CDR to guide these things. I don't think a lot of organizations in North America are thinking about that yet. Although I do think that they are thinking about that there should be something, they just don't necessarily know what that is. Because every time I've presented on CDR to a large North American company or any North American organization for that matter, there's a lot of interest and a lot of head shaking or head nodding and kind of agreement that, oh, yeah, these are issues and they're important and they're only getting increasingly important. And, of course, here in the US where I'm based, Facebook is on the stand in front of Congress, regularly now, as are many of the big tech companies. And so it is part of the kind of current cultural zeitgeist to, figure out like what the role of technology is in, governance and in government overall in the US, as well as just in how we run our organizations.
And of course, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing about digital responsibility is in part, it's about appropriate and ethical use of technology and being conscious of the potential harms and how we can mitigate that. But it's also to say that actually digital technologies and the use of data can be the solution as well. So how can we innovate and address some of the complexities, whether it be climate change, biodiversity, or societal sustainability through the use of technology as well. So it's one of the key things I think for us to say is CDR is not saying don't do these things.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
being aware and conscious of the impacts of the things that you are doing,
It's
and
balance.
equally innovating above and beyond that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's balance. It's making sure that one statement is said alongside the other. Technology doesn't mean technology is bad. It just means that there's a responsible way to use it. And same with design too. I think, to me, given what my agency does, design and technology go hand in hand. And, we're part of a global community of UX designers and developers and that kind of thing. And oftentimes people working within agencies and stuff like that are looking to align their work with a bigger, more innovation and bigger, broader goals, for a sustainable future.
So look, that's probably a great introduction to the second principle, isn't it? Which is fair and equitable access for all of society.
Yep.
So this is very much focusing on the importance and the power of equity, diversity, inclusion, and thinking about accessible products and making sure that everybody can engage, whether it's a member of society or employees within an organization, to demonstrate that we're thinking about how do we make sure that everybody can utilize it, that they have the skills, that they have the maturity of skills to kind of do those things. So I know this is a subject kind of really important for yourself as well. So it seems only right to talk about this one too.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a big one. I mean, we could spend an entire hour just talking about the aspects of that. You can't really talk about fair and equitable access to all without explicitly bringing up people with disabilities and talking, especially since so many, digital products and services are not, accessible, even though we've had guidelines for many, many years on how to do so. And that's a failure of the digital community. And we're failing a whole, up to whatever 20% of the population, could potentially have some disability, which, could be as simple as wearing reading glasses, but could be as also invisible as like a cognitive disability that impacts their ability to absorb information and stuff. So that's just one small aspect of what fair and equitable access to all means, because it also, you want to think about people who are in low bandwidth areas and people who don't have access to technology. And I mean, it's a big topic that requires a lot of thought, and especially as you're thinking about technology being this ability to solve some of these big wicked problems we have in society. You can't solve those problems without being inclusive in the way you create the solutions.
And I think when we saw earlier, I think it was earlier this year, that Samsung wrote a paper in Korea around the importance of CDR in the context of their products. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? In the sense that they're very much focused around, as a product business, kind of driving for accessibility to their product suites to maximize the opportunity for everybody. But let's not. I mean, there's another important aspect to this principle as well, which is thinking about employment rights across the supply chain. So certainly when we're thinking about things like the gig economy as well, and trying to ensure that there is the visibility and transparency across that supply chain, such that you as a consumer can be comforted by knowing how that product or how that service is provisioned, and that the people who've played a part in that have got an appropriate and an equitable share in the way in which they've been paid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, really, that whole idea of transparency around remuneration and just making sure that people are able to make a living wage, and that that a company is appropriately sourcing digital technologies in a way that there's transparency around its supply chain, and figuring out if someone's in that supply chain is not making a living wage, or somehow that company, without realizing it, is supporting child labor or slavery of some sort, or what I mean, like any of the things that can be there's a mini layered onion there of figuring out what are the things that could potentially be in your supply chain. And so it really does require companies to have a level of due diligence to make sure that their supply chains are as transparent as they can be, they're as diverse as they can be, and that they're really adhering to these ideas of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Absolutely. So Tim, I think it's kind of probably worth kind of taking a bit of time just to mention the broader team. So kind of Michael Wade and,
Yep.
Saskia Dorr, Christopher Johnson, who obviously did the work kind of previously with myself, yourself and Oliver Merks, who's kind of been collaborating. So there's a number of us across Germany, Switzerland, US, UK, and we've been joining the dots to try and bring this kind of definition together. It's published on the website, a number of websites actually, in English and German, and we've also done recent translations into French and Italian and Spanish. And it's been interesting to see the initial reaction across Europe, as kind of people have recognised that actually, yes, there may be initiatives within country, but it's good to see that kind of here's something trying to raise the awareness of that good work that's happening within those countries, but to provide a framework that others can hook into. What's your ambition or hope maybe for this going forward, and maybe especially with a lens around North America, and let's not forget Canada too, kind of across the border. What do you think? What could you see? What would be good happening over the next year?
I think in the spirit of the 18th SGG, I do like the idea of these things becoming second nature in any kind of governance framework or whatever. So, I mean, personally, as an owner of a B Corp, I'd love to see the B impact assessment incorporate these things just naturally into the several categories of the B impact assessment. I think there's a huge opportunity there for that, and definitely a hunger within the existing B Corp community for understanding that and knowing how to make the best decisions around there. I think that's for sure, especially in US and Canada, since there is one B Lab office for both US and Canada. That to me seems like a really great opportunity. I think also, personally, I'd love to see, this become adopted and evolved in ways that aren't, majority white. I'd love to see countries around the world, and think about this and figure out how to adopt it. Similarly, in the way that David Jensen and his team at the UN Environment Program are sourcing their ideas in these, large global brainstorming sessions and stuff, which I think are really powerful and exciting, and it's important to have all stakeholders or a larger group of stakeholders. This is a great first step. I've loved the collaboration, and it's also been really wonderful to have just a small group to kind of share ideas with. But now that it's out there in the public, the hope would be that people from all kinds of different walks of business would and in all kinds of different countries would look at this and say, well, this is how this applies here. This is what it's like in India. This is what it's like in South Africa. This is what it's like in Brazil, and figuring out, what we're missing, in our kind of, Eurocentric way of looking at this stuff. And just kind of understanding what we can do to make this a much broader set of principles and a framework that can work as broadly as possible.
Wholeheartedly agree. And in that regard, we should also mention that on the website where the principles are, there's a feedback form, so that if anyone has a desire to kind of get involved, and we've put a 6-monthly heartbeat to try and kind of make sure that we're taking any feedback that we get and tweaking it as we go forward, recognizing that, of course, this is a piece of work in late 2021 that builds on the work that was done in 2018, 2019, 2020. Right. It will constantly evolve, but it's about trying to kind of bring the best into one place and build on that. And of course, there's also the opportunity for individuals or organizations to express support. And as you rightly say, it would be fantastic to get direct involvement from people in some of the other countries that we know are exploring CDR. South Korea, I mentioned earlier. We know that there's a number of organizations that are looking at CDR there. We know that there's some interest in China as well, and India and Africa and beyond. So let's see kind of where it goes as the next steps. I also wanted to thank you, Tim, for the work that you've done over the kind of past few months. It's as you say, it's been great to have this as a collaboration, but important to bring different geographical perspectives and different perspectives that we each bring, whether as technologists or academics, as sustainability gurus, or as you say, kind of with a background in BCorp and sustainable web and kind of design UX kind of mentality. So that's been fantastic. And I should also like to thank you for the work that you've been doing around the graphics that many people will have been seeing as well, as we try to bring to life some of the words on the page through the images and the iconography that we're using to try and get people focused on these 7 core areas, 7 core principles that we think are important to kind of bring that balance to society and planet.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I certainly, the idea behind those is that those graphics are open source and available, that people can use them in whatever ways that they see fit. And I should, to that end, give a shout out to Other Things Creative, who've been our design partners at Mightybytes for many years. Jeremy and Buddy are amazing collaborators, and they've done some really incredible work on our behalf, and certainly with helping out with us with pulling all of these infographics together that hopefully explain a very complex topic in a really simple and easy to way for anybody to understand.
No, that's great. Thank you. So for anyone listening, do kind of check in over the next few weeks, as we'll be talking through the rest of the principles. We've covered a couple of the 7 today. We'll be coming back to the others and introducing them with others of the team who've kind of been working with this us over the last 6 months. Until then, thank you and goodbye.